cover sheet? Or are we just going to jump right in?
Okay, it looks like we are live. Susanna, if you can put our cover sheet up, that would be great. We're not. We'll just get started. Okay, so hi everybody. So glad to be here again with you for our Disability Rights Maryland Facebook Live question and answer event. I am Leslie Zag-Margolis. I manage the education work at Disability Rights Maryland, and we are joined by several of the usual crew and a new attorney working with us. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to just ask people to introduce themselves based on who I see in my screen. Tasha, do you want to go ahead?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tasha Marshall. I'm a paralegal here with the Education Unit.
Okay, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here tonight. I'm an attorney with the education team.
Susanna.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Susana Barrios, and I am outreach specialist, and I will also help us being as an interpreter tonight. Buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Susana Barrios. Yo trabajo para Disability Rights Maryland y voy a estar aquí para ser intérprete. Si alguien lo necesita, pueden hacer sus preguntas en los comentarios y yo se las traduciré para ustedes.
And Maria.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Ott, and I'm a new attorney at Disability Rights Maryland in the Education Unit.
Great. So we would encourage you to put your questions in the chat box. And when you do, please tell us what school district you live in. We really would like to know where you're from and what particular issues you're facing in your district. So just to get us started, we know that, last week, the governor at his press conference really urged school systems to open. We know that a lot of the school systems are talking about reopening in some fashion on March 1st. We know that some districts have opened to some extent already. And we know that one of the questions that's uppermost in a lot of your minds is the question of whether when schools reopen, you are going to have to send your child back, even if there are reasons why it may not be appropriate for your child to return to school. And perhaps your child is immunocompromised, or a member of your family is immunocompromised, or there may be other reasons. We know families have asked us about, what if my child can't wear a mask or, can't be socially distanced. So we can address some of those specific questions about masks and social distancing a little bit later. But we did want to say that as far as we can tell from the districts that we've looked at so far, and all the information that we're seeing coming down from on high, families will have a choice about whether or not to return their child to school. So you won't be forced to send your child back. The question will become, will your child continue virtually, or if your child is not able to benefit from virtual learning, what's a free appropriate public education going to look like? And that's a larger discussion. But the kind of initial issue is nobody's going to be forced to send their child back if there are reasons not to go back. It's parental choice. And I think a lot of the districts have sent out questionnaires to families asking them if they would want to send their child back or do hybrid or do continue virtual. So we wanted to just throw that out there at the beginning. Megan, do you want to address masks? What happens if a child can't wear a mask?
Sure. So we know that sort of, the issue of mask wearing is on a lot of parents' minds. And I've also seen messaging that school districts are sending out saying, as we prepare to open the school buildings, we recommend that parents sort of, just start working with their children to start wearing masks and building up tolerance to wear masks. And we know that will work for some kids, but we also know that there are some students who won't be able to tolerate a mask and aren't able to wear masks. And so a lot of the school districts are trying to work with families. They know it can be an issue. There are parents and the districts working together. You can go to your school team now, you can go to your IEP team now if this is an issue for your student and say, let's start talking about my child's needs and mask wearing and how to build up tolerance for that. School systems, they will have to accommodate your child if there is sort of an underlying need and a need that's preventing them, a disability, medical diagnosis that's preventing them from being able to wear the mask. The school system is required to accommodate. A lot of the school systems have different policies in place, and it will really be working with your child's IEP team to figure out how best to support your student, what your particular student's needs are, and whether you can work to sort of build up the mask tolerance. And if not, because we know that that's just not going to work for some students, then what are the alternatives? Is it a face shield? Is it the teachers and the providers wearing sort of additional PPE? Is it additional physical spacing? So there are certainly accommodations that can be made outside of actually wearing that mask that can be put into place. And so, as always, we sort of recommend that you go to your IEP team and you start having those conversations now and putting in, sort of time working to sort of prepare your student if you do decide that you want your child to return either hybrid or to some form of in-person school.
So I would just underscore what Megan said. This is the time to go to your IEP team to ask for a meeting to talk about this if you anticipate an issue with mask wearing. And whatever you come up with a team should be on your child's IEP. So for some children, it might be the social stories would be helpful in helping a child get used to the idea of a mask. For children who have sensory issues, it may be that building up tolerance to wearing a mask or playing around with the type of mask and the type of fabric and how the mask is adjusted. For students who have health conditions that prevent them from wearing masks or who really cannot tolerate them, as Megan said, the school system will have to make accommodations. So. Likewise for students who can't socially distance, there are students who have disabilities that require hands-on assistance during the day. So staff will need to take precautions with them, but there are other students whose disabilities just make them unable to understand the reasons for social distancing. And so accommodations will need to be put in place for those students as well. It doesn't look like we have questions yet. Do we have any questions yet, Tasha?
No questions yet.
Okay, well, please, those of you who are watching, throw some questions into the chat box. We know that there is also, I'm sorry, Tasha.
Leslie. Looks like we do have one. One just came in.
Okay.
And in Montgomery County, this person is new to the area, currently on an IFSP, and that's an individual family support plan, hopefully moving to an IEP when the public schools start opening up in the next few weeks. I never know if I'm getting all the information, if I know about every option that the school could be providing. Is it crazy to ask for a menu of options? My 4-year-old has been diagnosed with ASD, speech delay, sensory issues, cognitive delay, OCD, ADHD, and disruptive behavior. So we have many challenges and really need a lot of help, but I don't want to sound like I'm asking for the moon during the IEP meetings.
So that's a great question. And I think it's hard when you don't have a lot of experience with the district and when you have a young child to know, what does it make sense to ask for? And I think there are a couple of answers to that. One is to use the information that you get from the professionals who are treating your child. If you have gotten evaluations, whatever recommendations your child's pediatrician or developmental pediatrician may be suggesting as a guide for thinking about what to be asking for from the school system. To listen to what the school system is recommending, but also to tap into the knowledge and the expertise that other parents offer. So you're not doing this by yourself. And in Montgomery County, actually, there is a group called MC Needs, which is a listserv of hundreds of parents that can be a resource for you. You could just say, I've got a child with these disabilities, this constellation. What options are out there? What should I be asking for? There also are autism support groups. And I think that other parents can be a real resource in telling you what worked for their kids, what their services were. But I'd look also, again, at the professionals who are serving your child and be guided by their recommendations as well. Anybody, do you want to add to that, Megan?
I was just going to mention there's one organization in Montgomery County called X Minds, and you can Google them, and they're sort of an incredible resource with a ton of education materials and training materials and parents of students with ASD. And so that's just one particular organization that I know is doing really great work in Montgomery County that would be a really great resource.
So Maria, I know you're brand new to this, but you are involved with X Minds. Do you want to jump on and just talk for a minute about how parents can access X Minds?
Absolutely. So former board member of it's actually the full name is called Partnership for Extraordinary Minds, and our nickname is X Minds, and the website is xminds.org. And the mission of the organization is to improve the educational experience, educational outcomes and experiences of children in Montgomery County Public Schools who are on the spectrum. And if you go to the website, they have a wealth of information on all sorts of things, from the different autism programs at the school throughout the county, and all kinds of resources for specific issues such as nonverbal autistics or other parts of the spectrum. Another resource that X Minds has been offering is monthly webinars on specific topics. They're free, they're virtual. You can just log in and attend, and they've proven extremely helpful. So I think that's a perfect website and organization for you to turn to if you have questions.
Para la persona que pidió el intérprete, perdón, hasta ahorita voy a empezar, pero le acaban de recomendar una página que se llama X Minds, M-I-D-I-S, y ahí en esa página puede ir y tiene muchos recursos para personas con autismo en Montgomery County.
Another thing that, I like to tell parents when you're going into an IEP meeting, and I know, you said, can I ask for a menu of options? And so what I think is, what I think is so important for parents to do is just to ask questions to all the teachers in the meeting. If you don't understand something, just pause and ask them to explain it in a different way. And a lot of times what happens in a meeting is that the more questions you ask, the more information comes out, and then the team starts talking about different options and alternatives without you sort of, demanding sort of different alternatives. But just by asking questions, they end up providing you with different alternatives and different considerations. And then you, as the parent who know your child best, can then, weigh in and ask follow-up questions.
I'm going to interpret because there's somebody. Dice, alguien preguntó que si puede ir a una reunión y pedir con un menú de las cosas que si puede pedir un menú de cosas que están disponibles para los estudiantes. Ella dice que lo que ella recomienda es que hagan preguntas de lo que esté disponible. Then you said, after you said ask questions, I'm sorry, so ask a lot of questions during the IEP meeting, and then?
Yes, and then the teachers and the IEP team members will answer your questions and provide you a lot of times with additional information and sometimes different options and alternatives.
Y entonces los maestros y también el personal que está en el equipo de educación individualizada pueden darles otras ideas, les pueden contestar las respuestas y también pueden proveer otra información de las cosas que están disponibles.
I know that we have questions in the chat box, but there are 2 more points that I want to make to follow up what Megan said. First, IEP meetings, often the school system will put a time limit on them. Don't be afraid to ask for more time or ask that the meeting be continued so that you have enough time to raise all of the issues you want to talk about and ask all of your questions.
Otra cosa que quiero agregar, aparte de lo que Megan dijo, es de que muchas veces en una reunión de plan individualizado, de educación de plan individualizado, que como le dicen IEP, ellos ponen un límite de tiempo. No tenga miedo a hacer sus preguntas y a pedir, y si no tiene tiempo, a pedir que le den más tiempo o que continúen la reunión.
And secondly, often the team will talk in acronyms or abbreviations. Don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand something, to ask them to explain what an abbreviation means.
Y también muchas veces el equipo habla dando solo letras o dando abreviaciones. Si no entiende, no tenga miedo de preguntar qué significan esas abreviaciones.
And actually, I'm going to add 2 more points. One, we have a special education manual accessible on our website in both Spanish and English that lays out how the special education process works. So feel free to take a look at that.
Y también tengo 2 puntos más. Tenemos un manual acerca de educación especial que está accesible en nuestra página de internet. Está en inglés y en español. Así que siéntase con comodidad de ir a revisar eso.
And finally, the school system is required to send you all meeting notices and copies of the IEP in your native language. So you can ask for the IEP, but all the notices are required to be sent to you in your language.
Entonces también el sistema escolar tiene que mandarle a usted todas las notificaciones y el documento de, como decíamos, IEP en su lenguaje natal. Entonces se lo tienen que mandar a ustedes en su lenguaje natal para que lo puedan entender.
So Tasha, we've got some questions.
Y Tasha, tenemos unas preguntas.
Yes. So we have a viewer whose question is related to the fact that her clients want her to observe their children who attend a non-public. Rika and the Harbor School. These schools say that I can't, but because it violates HIPAA law or other privacy laws. I have been able to observe in other non-publics, so what can I do to observe?
Tenemos a una persona que pregunta, tengo un cliente que quiere que yo vaya a observar a su estudiante en una escuela privada, Rica y Harvard. Estas escuelas me han dicho de que no puedo ir a observarlo porque hay leyes de privacidad, pero hay otras escuelas que me han dejado hacer lo mismo. ¿Qué puedo hacer para poder observar a este estudiante?
Sorry, Leslie, I think you were muted. So I'm happy to, an advocate's, ability to observe, it's the same as when schools were, when we were in the building, in the brick and mortar building, and, parents were working with, a special education consultant or advocate, and they were able to observe. They're still, that's still happening and should still be happening. And with respect to certain non-publics, it sounds like you've been able to observe in some non-publics and not in others. But I think that probably may be sort of a question that you are welcome to sort of follow up with us offline through our emails, but consultants' ability to, observe students should not be affected by the fact that we're now virtual, and we know that it is still going forward.
Bueno, los defensores los han dejado observar en las escuelas. Ahora, muchas veces están diciendo de que porque es virtual no puede pasar, pero esto no cambiaría ya que estamos en virtual, y tal vez esto sería algo de que usted nos puede comunicar en privado a través de un correo electrónico, pero no debería de afectar el hecho de que puedan observar, al menos de que, ni porque esté en escuela virtual.
Tasha?
We have a Baltimore County resident whose question is, how can Baltimore County get a waiver to open after March 1st, since our ransomware attack still has us delayed on IEP meetings? Those of us choosing to be hybrid need to revise our IEP for in-person instruction.
Ok, hace otra pregunta. ¿Cómo puede el condado de Baltimore County pedir un permiso para empezar después del 1 de marzo? Pues tuvimos un ataque al sistema de computadoras y todavía esto causó de que hubiera un retraso en las reuniones de educación especial. Para nosotros que estamos escogiendo que nuestros hijos necesitan una educación, asistir a un sistema híbrido, tienen que revisar el plan de educación especial para instrucciones en persona.
So what will happen when students return to school is that the IEP that was in place before the pandemic will be the IEP that will be implemented. So it's all this pandemic IEP learning plan thing that's been in place has been temporary, and it's understood that the brick and mortar IEP in place is what will be in place from day one when students return. I'm going to let Susanna interpret, and then I'm going to continue.
Entonces, cuando empezó la pandemia, hicieron unos planes temporáneos que le llamaban planes de continuación, pero se supone que cuando ellos regresen a la escuela en persona, ellos tienen que regresar al plan original que estaban antes de la pandemia.
We know that that lots of kids have not remained the same since schools closed, and that there may be a need for additional services or different services than are what were on that brick and mortar IEP. And so there need to be IEP meetings for kids, but that's not a reason not to return to school with the IEP that was in place. So I think we aren't, we're not advocating additional waivers to keep kids out of school longer, simply because there's been a delay in IEP meetings because of the ransomware attack.
Y sabemos de que muchos niños no son los mismos que cuando empezó todo esto, pero eso no quiere decir de que no regresen a la escuela y que empiecen usando el plan de educación especial que tenían antes y que después tengan las reuniones. O sea que nosotros no estamos abogando que los niños se queden sin asistir a la escuela en persona, solo porque no tienen un plan de educación especial actualizado.
We're quite concerned about the delays that already have taken place in Baltimore County because of the ransomware attack. There have been delays in assessments, delays in IEP meetings, and it's been quite problematic. And so we want to see things move along as quickly as possible. Do you want to add anything, Megan, before we, after Susanna interprets, before we move on to the next question?
Estamos bastante preocupados de los retrasos que hubieron ya por el ataque al sistema de computación en el condado de Baltimore County. Hubieron atrasos en asesorías, en los exámenes de asesorías, los planes de IEP, las reuniones de IEP. Entonces, queremos que ellos regresen.
I was just going to add that if you're a Baltimore County parent and if you had an annual meeting or any type of IEP meeting that was delayed because of the ransomware attack, reach out to the IEP team and request that it be rescheduled as soon as possible.
Quiero solo agregar que si usted es un padre en el condado de Baltimore County y tuvo una reunión de plan de educación especial que fue retrasado a causa del ataque en el sistema de computadoras, que se comunique con el equipo de IEP en su escuela y pida otra reunión.
And if you feel that there has been a substantial violation of your child's rights, or you want to consult with us about the specifics of your child's case, feel free to reach out to Susanna, whose contact information will be in the chat box, and you can do an intake with her. Not just, and that's not just for Baltimore County, that's for any of you who are listening. We are available for intake, for guidance, for potential representation, depending on our ability to manage more cases.
Y si usted siente que se han violado los derechos de su niño en una manera bastante sustancial, por favor comuníquese con nosotros. Le vamos a poner la información de Susana aquí en los comentarios para que se pueda comunicar para nosotros y nosotros le podemos hacer tomar su información. Y esto no es solo para las personas de Baltimore County, esto es para cualquier persona en cualquier parte del estado de Maryland. Porque ahorita tenemos más personal que puede a tratar de ayudarlos.
Next question, Tasha.
We have a viewer who wants to know if we've heard anything about transitioning youth getting another year because of COVID.
Okay, Susanna.
Tenemos a una persona que está preguntando si sabemos algo acerca de agregar un año más porque a las personas que están por graduarse a causa de COVID.
That's a great question. There's nothing coming from the State Department of Education other than that is an individual decision to make in the IEP team. But Susanna, go ahead and then I'll continue.
No hay nada, no hay nada que está saliendo de parte del Departamento de Educación del Estado, aparte de que ellos dicen que esto será una decisión individual que lo tiene que hacer cada equipo de IEP.
But there is a bill that has been introduced in both the House and the Senate of the Maryland General Assembly, which is currently in session, that would allow an extension of up to a year for transition age students 17 and older. So that bill, we don't know what will happen with that bill, but if it passes, then students with disabilities 17 and older would be entitled to potentially an extra year of service.
Hay una propuesta de ley que está en el Senado y en la Casa de Delegados, en la Asamblea de Maryland, la que propone de que los niños de 17 años puedan, o más, se les puede agregar un año, pero ahorita solo es una propuesta de ley y todavía no sabemos si va a pasar.
And I don't have the bill numbers at hand, but we'll post them, and we'll find those numbers and post them in case you're interested in submitting testimony or testifying on those bills. Tasha.
Oh, sorry. No tengo los números de las propuestas ahora, pero vamos a ponerlos, a publicarlos por si están interesados en dar testimonio por escrito o si quieren apoyarlos.
We have a Baltimore County parent who says that her son has an IEP under primary disability, autism. After evaluation, neuropsychological eval done at Kennedy, he is diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and learning disability in math. First question, can we have more than one code for an IEP? Do you want me to just go through, Leslie?
No, let Susanna interpret.
Okay.
Tenemos una persona que pregunta, tiene un niño que le han hecho una evaluación psicológica y le han diagnosticado con autismo, deficiencia de atención con hiperactividad. And what was the last one after ADHD and autism?
Learning disability in math.
Oh, y problemas de aprendizaje en matemáticas. La pregunta es, ¿se puede poner su discapacidad con más de un código?
I don't see ADHD or specific learning disability in math on my son's IEP at all. Second question. I'm sorry.
No veo deficiencia de hiperactividad ni un problema de aprendizaje en matemáticas para nada en su plan educacional.
Second question, is a disagreement, February 2020, my son's math level was high kindergarten, early first grade. Now using a placement testing of 4 questions in addition, 4 in subtraction, 4 in word problem. BCPS is stating my son's math level is early second grade for addition and subtraction and third grade for word problems.
En febrero, el condado de Baltimore County decía de que él tenía un nivel de kindergarten o párvulos, pero ahora le hicieron una evaluación de ver dónde quedaba y dicen que él en matemáticas está en nivel de segundo grado. And what is it that he's in third grade level?
Word problems.
Y en un nivel de tercero primaria en problemas de palabras o con problemas leídos.
I totally disagree with grade level BCPS for my son's math level. Do we have any suggestions? I want to ask for an evaluation. Thank you.
no estoy de acuerdo con los resultados de sus evaluaciones, tienen alguna sugerencia, do you have any suggestions and what's the last part?
I want to ask for an evaluation.
Y quiero pedir una evaluación.
So I think this is the perfect time to recommend that you call our intake line and reach out to Susanna so that an attorney can talk with you about the specific details of your student's situation.
Este es un buen caso de que usted debería de comunicarse con Susana para que podamos tomar su información.
And just generally speaking, yes, the disability code can be multiple disabilities and can represent more than just, one disability. And there are, additional places in the IEP that can reflect, the student's disabilities as well, because you want to absolutely make sure that the IEP captures all of the disabilities and all of the students' needs. But we will.
Y hablando en general, sí puede poner más de un código como su discapacidad, pero también hay otros lugares en el documento de IEP en donde pueden poner y reflejar todas las discapacidades que tiene el estudiante, pues debe de estar todo por escrito de todo lo que ellos tienen. Sorry, go ahead.
Are we done with that one?
Yes.
So related to the previous question about transition, if the transitioning youth get another year, will it affect the DDA funding or put them at the bottom of the list?
Entonces, dándole otra pregunta acerca de transición. Si el joven le dan un año más, ¿quiere decir que esto va a afectar el dinero que le dan o los servicios que le dan a través de el departamento de discapacidades? No, perdón, el departamento de discapacidades de desarrollo, o los va a poner abajo en la lista.
So according to the legislation that's been introduced, no, an extra year would not affect eligibility for the transitioning youth funds or for services under the Department of Rehabilitation Services, DORS.
No, de acuerdo a la propuesta de ley, esto no afectaría la cantidad de dinero o servicios que recibirían, y tampoco la afectaría de parte de un programa que se llama Departamento de Servicios de Rehabilitación, por sus siglas en inglés, DORS.
Next question is, what about Maryland non-public school openings?
So, go ahead, Susanna.
La próxima pregunta es, ¿qué pasa con las escuelas que no son públicas para abrir?
So the non-public schools are private schools. They are receiving public funds to serve students, but they're not controlled by the local school system. So it's really up to the non-public school whether or not it opens, and that's a decision the school's going to make. And then we'll go ahead, Susanna, and then I'll continue.
Las escuelas no públicas son escuelas privadas que funcionan recibiendo de dinero de las escuelas públicas, pero siguen siendo escuelas privadas y entonces ellos no están dirigidos por ningún sistema escolar. Entonces ellos son los que van a decidir si abren o no.
So if some schools are opening and some aren't, and you have a child who needs to be in person for services, that may require you to return to the IEP team for a meeting about whether a different placement is required.
Entonces, si unas escuelas están abriendo y otras no, y su hijo necesita recibir clases en persona, puede de que necesita tener una reunión de IEP y que se discuta de que él necesita un diferente lugar para asistir.
Or if there's another temporary arrangement that can be made until the school reopens.
O si se puede hacer un arreglo temporáneo que se pueda hacer hasta que la escuela vuelva a abrir.
Additional information for that same viewer. She indicated that her son's non-pub in Baltimore says even with the governor's new mandate, they're not going to open.
Y la misma persona dio información adicional que dice que la escuela que no es pública, donde asiste su hijo, les dijo de que aunque el gobernador haya mandado a que vayan a abrir las escuelas, ellos no van a abrir.
So the governor can't actually order schools to open because only the superintendent of the State Department of Education can do that. And she can't order the non-public schools to open because they're non-public schools. So it depends on the contracts. It's a complicated situation. Go ahead, Susanna, and then I'll continue.
Entonces, el gobernador no puede mandar a las escuelas que abran. La única persona que puede hacerlo es la superintendente del Departamento de Educación del Estado. Entonces, y ella no puede mandar tampoco a las escuelas privadas a que abran, solo porque todo tiene que ver con el contrato. Entonces, es una situación muy complicada.
So this has a lot to do with what is perceived as local control by school systems, and then the contractual relationship between the school systems and the non-public schools in the state.
Y eso tiene que ver mucho en lo que los sistemas escolares son gobernados localmente, y también tiene que ver con los contratos entre el sistema escolar y las escuelas que no son públicas.
But the bottom line is that your child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, and your local school system is obligated to ensure that your child receives a free, appropriate public education. However, they arrange for that to happen.
Pero al final de cuentas, su hijo tiene derecho a una educación gratis y apropiada, y el sistema escolar tiene que darle a su hijo una educación gratis y apropiada, sin que no importa cómo se la vayan a entregar.
Do you want to add anything, Megan? Or should Tasha go on?
I'll just add, again, if you feel like your student is not sort of accessing a virtual education at the non-public placement, then just go back to the IEP team to express those concerns and talk about options.
Y quiero agregar de que si usted siente de que su hijo no está recibiendo lo que necesita en una escuela que no es pública, entonces que regrese al plan, al equipo de IEP, y que exprese sus preocupaciones.
I just want to say one more thing, which is that sometimes I think families feel like going back to the IEP team is pointless because the team doesn't listen to you, or you've already asked for something and they've said no. It's important to go to the team because the team is required to produce documentation.
Entonces quiero agregar que muchas veces los padres dicen, ya no quiero regresar a otra reunión porque el equipo de IEP no me hace caso, o todo lo que yo digo ellos no quieren hacer, pero es muy importante que se reúnan, porque cada vez que se reúnen el equipo de IEP tiene que proveer documentación.
So if there is something that you think your child needs, or you have a concern about the school staying closed when everything else is opening, you should bring that to the team and then ask them to explain how they're going to ensure that your child will get all the services on the IEP, how they will provide a free appropriate public education, and to give you what's called prior written notice that explains all of that to you.
Entonces, si usted está viendo que su escuela no está abriendo y todas las demás escuelas están abriendo, entonces se tienen que reunir y ellos le tienen que explicar a usted por qué es que no le van a dar lo que necesita, y si le tienen que dar a usted a través de esta explicación, se lo tienen que dar a través de un documento que se llama aviso previo por escrito, y eso le va a explicar todo por qué fue que no le están negando.
Tasha?
Margaret wants to know, why is the county forcing ECI students like my 4-year-old, like my son who is 4, wearing a mask for hybrid? I feel like he has no choice but to stay virtual for the rest of the year.
What is ECI? Do we know? Ok, preguntan una persona, ¿por qué el condado está forzando a de que mi hijo de 3 años tenga que usar la mascarilla todo el día? Él está en un programa que ella se menciona como ESI, y siente que él no tiene porque el niño es muy chiquito, no tiene otra opción más que participar en la escuela virtual
And
para el
the-
resto del año.
I'm sorry. And the second part is, to that question is, can she get a doctor's note to excuse him from wearing a mask?
Y la segunda parte de esa pregunta es, pues, ¿puede ella tener una nota del doctor diciendo que él no puede usar la máscara?
And do we know what ECI is?
I think it's the early childhood program.
That's what I was thinking.
Megan, do you want to?
Sure. So with respect to, I think there's 2 issues. I think the first is what we talked about in the beginning, is that it's our understanding that school systems won't be forcing students back into the building, and that parents will have a choice to either return hybrid or stay virtual. And then I'll adjust the mask.
Sí, creo que hay un malentendido, que muchas personas creen que las escuelas van a estar forzando a que los niños regresen a la escuela, pero la realidad es que tienen una opción, que pueden ir híbrido o pueden seguir virtual.
But if you want your student to return in person and they're having trouble wearing a mask, we recommend going to the IEP team or the IFSP team and talking with the team about what accommodations your child needs to either prepare. Yeah, go ahead and then I'll.
Entonces, lo que recomendamos es, si su estudiante tiene problemas para usar una mascarilla, que regresen a una reunión de IEP y que hablen acerca de posibles acomodaciones que le puedan hacer.
And so ask the IEP team to support and work with your student, if possible, to build up tolerance of wearing the mask. And if that's not possible.
Y pedirle al equipo de que trabajen con el niño, si es posible, para que pueda tener más tolerancia para usar la mascarilla más tiempo, pero si no es posible.
If it's not possible for your child to wear a mask because of an underlying health condition or some other reason, then ask the school, the IEP team is required to accommodate your student.
Entonces, si hay, por alguna razón, el estudiante no puede usar la mascarilla, ya sea porque tiene razones de salud o por algo, o que no puede tener la tolerancia, entonces le deben de dar otras diferentes acomodaciones porque él no puede usar la mascarilla.
It's a mask exception.
Es una excepción para usar la mascarilla. So there's a question in Spanish. It says, it's gonna take me a second, sorry, because I have to translate it. I know that it's hard for teachers and students and parents with the virtual learning, but my son's teacher gives the class for 10 to 15 minutes, and sometimes he does 2 classes all at once. So in reality, my son has only almost 30 to 45 minutes of classes per day. My question is this something that is appropriate? Plus, the teacher changes the time that she gives the class every day or often. What can I do? Perdón, acabo de leer a la señora Nena Orozco, acabo de leer su pregunta y ahorita se la van a responder.
Okay. So as of September, the intent was that students were going to get a pretty much full day of school, but it would be online. So roughly 3.5 hours would be live with the teacher, and then the rest would be what they call synchronous, and then what they call asynchronous, could be done on their own time.
Entonces, para la señora Orozco, perdón, no leí la pregunta en español. Ella dice que al niño solo le dan 15 a 20 minutos o 10 a 15 minutos a la vez de instrucción. En total, de 35 minutos nada más al día. Ella quiere saber qué puede hacer. Entonces, la respuesta es de que a partir de septiembre, se supone que los niños tienen que estar recibiendo un horario completo. Y eso es de que tiene que ser por lo menos 3 horas y media de instrucción en persona y el resto del tiempo que sea tal vez trabajo independiente.
And what we found was that many children can't tolerate that many hours online, but if they can, 30 to 45 minutes is not appropriate.
Y lo que encontramos es que hay varios niños que no pueden estarse enfrente de la computadora tanto tiempo, pero si ellos pueden hacerlo, 30 a 45 minutos no es apropiado.
Because if you think about it, your child has an IEP that's supposed to be a 6-hour a day IEP. You can't possibly implement that in 30 or 45 minutes a day.
Porque si lo piensa, su hijo tiene un plan de educación individualizado y eso quiere decir que ahí tiene él 6 horas de servicios de instrucciones y no pueden implementar ese plan si solo le están dando esa cantidad de instrucción.
And the State Department of Ed has made very clear that the intent is for IEPs to be implemented.
Y el Departamento de Educación del Estado lo ha hecho muy claro de que ellos tienen que implementar el plan de educación individualizada, IEP.
So that is a problem, and you can certainly ask for an IEP meeting, but no, go ahead.
Eso sí es un problema y definitivamente usted puede pedir por otra reunión de IEP.
But one thing that it will be very helpful for you if you have not already been doing this is to document the amount of time your child actually is receiving services because you will be able to make an argument for an entitlement to compensatory or makeup services for the time that your child should have been getting services and did not.
Y algo que usted puede hacer si no lo ha estado haciendo hasta ahora es que puede empezar a documentar la cantidad de tiempo que él le están dando de servicios, de instrucciones, porque así usted puede hacer un pedido acerca de los servicios que no le han dado y que le tenían que haber estado dando.
So the other issue that I do want to respond to is the teacher changing the schedule all the time. We know that distance learning is very challenging for all of you. We also know that teachers are dealing with their own issues with their children in distance learning, and so there may need to be some flexibility. But go ahead.
Y también la otra cosa que quiero decir es acerca de que le están cambiando el horario todo el tiempo. Sé que sabemos que muchos niños tienen problemas con el aprendizaje virtual y sabemos de que tiene que haber alguna clase de flexibilidad, pero
we know that most teachers have figured out regular schedules for their classes and for meetings with their students, and they should be giving those schedules to families ahead of time. If there's a need for a change, it should be it should be noted as much ahead of time as possible. The schedule should not. I would think it's not appropriate for the schedule to constantly be changing the way it sounds like it is from your description.
La mayoría de maestros ahorita ya tienen una idea de cómo trabajan los horarios de los niños y deberían de tener un horario regular y avisarle a los padres de cómo va a trabajar ese horario. No deberían de estar cambiándolo. Si van a cambiarlo, le deben de avisar a los padres con suficiente tiempo, pero no deberían de estarlo cambiando así por así.
And I don't know what your child's disabilities are, but for many of the children we represent, routine and schedules are very important, and any changes in those schedules, transition changes, are very, very challenging. So any changes from day to day are really inappropriate for our clients who need routine. And I don't know if that's an issue for your child or if it's been a barrier to effective education. But if it is, again, feel free to reach out to Susana for an intake.
Entonces, no sé cuáles son las habilidades de su hijo, pero muchos de nuestros clientes necesitan una rutina y un horario, porque para ellos es muy difícil los cambios de rutina sin que se les prepare, les cuesta la transición, cambio. Entonces, otra vez no sé cuáles son las habilidades de su hijo o si eso es problema con él, pero si usted necesita ayuda, por favor, comuníquese con Susana.
So Tasha, I'm trying to monitor the chat box. It looks like there are no more questions.
I don't see a question, but I see a statement related to Baltimore County's ransomware attack. And the statement is, Baltimore County Public Schools, due to the ransomware attack, still doesn't have Wi-Fi working in all of our school buildings. This is why some schools still haven't been able to schedule IEP meetings.
Ok, entonces hay otra persona que dice de que por el ataque en el condado de Baltimore County, por el ataque al sistema de computadoras, el internet no está trabajando en todas las escuelas. Y ven que esta es una de las razones porque no han podido hacer reuniones de IEP. There is one more question in Spanish.
So before you
Okay.
get that last question, I'm going to date myself. I've been doing this work for a very long time. I've been doing this work since before all of the IEPs and this whole process was computerized. Baltimore County needs to figure this out. This is not a reason not to hold IEP meetings. It is not a reason to deny your children the education services to which they have been denied. And if they are using the ransomware attack as a reason for delays in getting appropriate services to your children, then do feel free to reach out to our office.
Entonces dice, voy a decir un poco de qué tan de mi edad, pero las escuelas, los sistemas escolares habían tenido reuniones de IEP muchísimo antes que de que tuviera la tecnología. Entonces, no, el sistema no puede seguir usando la excusa del ataque a sus computadoras por una razón, por no darle los servicios que su hijo necesita. Entonces, si ustedes ven que ellos no quieren trabajar con ustedes, por favor, siéntanse libres de llamarnos.
So I know that we're about at 7:30, but Tasha, why don't we just do this one last question?
Sé que ya estamos a las 7:30, entonces vamos a hacer una última pregunta.
Is the last question in Spanish? I don't see a last question.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so she says, my son is very hyperactive and he needs a person to help him with his classes. Is there a way to get somebody to help you temporarily? La pregunta es, a mi hijo me gustaría que tuviera una persona que lo ayudara con sus clases porque él es muy hiperactivo y no pone atención. ¿Será posible que tome esa ayuda temporal?
Go for it, Megan.
So what we have been advising parents to do is if your child is not able to successfully access or participate in virtual learning.
Entonces, lo que hemos estado diciéndole a la gente es que si su niño está teniendo problemas para tener acceso o participar en aprendizaje virtual,
is first to start keeping a log, some sort of record at home, if you're able to, of the instruction that your child is missing.
entonces de primero es que mantengan mantengan datos acerca de si usted puede, de la instrucción que su niño está perdiendo.
So that when you reach out to the school and request an IEP team, you can explain to the team and use sort of, your recorded data to explain to the team that your child isn't able to access the instruction and they're missing, so many minutes or hours of school a day and that they need an accommodation. And it might be an in-person support.
Y entonces, cuando tenga toda esta información que usted haya guardado, sería bueno que se comunique con la escuela y pida una reunión de IEP y usando la información que usted tiene, que use eso como evidencia y decirles, mi hijo ha perdido cierta cantidad de minutos, de horas de instrucción. Y entonces usted puede decir eso, que si le pueden dar, ya sea, ahí es donde usted puede pedir si le pueden dar una persona que trabaje con él.
School teams can put a lot of accommodations in place to help your student. They can be virtual accommodations. Sometimes they can put a virtual one-to-one in place to help your student engage. And if those things don't work,
entonces las escuelas pueden poner varias acomodaciones en lo que son el tema virtual. Uno de esos es que ya sea le pongan a alguien virtualmente que esté a la par de él para que él se enfoque, pero si eso no trabaja.
So if even after accommodations are put in place virtually, your student's still not able to access and participate in the virtual education, you can ask for in-person supports.
Y entonces si después de que, a pesar de que le han puesto a alguien que esté trabajando con él virtualmente, eso no trabaja, entonces ahí ya puede decir, y no puede tener el acceso a su educación, entonces ahí usted ya puede decir que necesita una persona a la par de él.
Okay, so again, we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Great questions, lively hour. We please feel free, as we've said, to reach out to Susanna if you have questions or would like to complete an intake. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. So thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Entonces, se nos acabó el tiempo, pero por favor, vamos a poner mi información de contacto aquí en los comentarios cuando terminemos. Y por favor, llámenos si tienen alguna pregunta y yo estaré ahí para ayudarlos. Gracias, feliz noche.
Good night, everyone.
Can you get us over, Megan?
Were
We're still
Were you-
live.
were you able to switch me over as the user?
Can I what?
So Megan Collins, were you able to switch me over and then I can do it? She had.
Oh, okay, wait. Yes, and yes, I can switch you over to host.
Yes, and then
Yes,
I can do
okay.
it.
Yes, okay. Just did.